right, guys, welcome to Man Medicine, where we talk about how men can optimize their health and escape the collapsing U.S. healthcare system. So today I've got a very special guest, a good, close personal friend of mine, Cullen Smith. Cullen Smith is a PhD pharmacist, correct? And specializes in compounding. He's been compounding medications for over 10 years. And so we're going to talk to you guys about compounding pharmacies. We're going to talk about this new FDA warning on semaglutide, compounded semaglutide, and why some of these warnings are nonsense. But also to educate you guys about compounding pharmacies a little bit, maybe bust a few myths. And I think you guys are going to like this one. So you and I go way back, way back. We were roommates in college. Cullen was one of my best all-time training partners, and back in the U of O days in the early 90s, we were obsessed with deadlifting, squats, box squats, plyometrics, rugby, everything.
Running the stadium
stairs at Autzen Stadium. Or it was Hayward Field, actually. It was Hayward Field.
Yeah, Hayward.
So sadly, we don't get to lift so much anymore, maybe once or twice a year together. But when we do, it's still good. It's still good.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah. So, dude, let's talk to me a little bit about, tell me what you do on a regular basis as a compounding pharmacist. And maybe in the process of doing that, you can educate people about what a compounding pharmacist does, what a compounding pharmacy is. Because I'll be honest with you, when I went through med school and both of my residencies, I didn't even know that compounding pharmacies even existed. Now, granted, that was probably because I was a military doc and I was sort of enslaved to the TRICARE formulary, so they didn't want us going outside of the TRICARE formulary. But I just thought it was strange that I never even knew that these things existed and there were even an option for my patients. And now in my private practice, I use them extensively because I think that they're amazing. So can you tell me a little bit about what the heck is a compounding pharmacy? What do you do on a daily basis as a compounding pharmacist?
Right. So basically, on a day-to-day basis, compounding pharmacies essentially will make any kind of custom medical drug combination pursuant to whatever medical need a patient may have. So we work with the physicians and the patient to come up with novel remedies to their various maladies that may not be out there on the market for myriad reasons. Like there could be anything from a drug shortage, where if we still have it on hand, then we're allowed by FDA to even compound things that may not be approved if needed.
Or even if they're still on patent, you can still do it, right? If there's a official shortage.
Exactly. If there's a shortage on the market, then there's exceptions, which is a good thing. So and that's where we can come in to kind of save the day. But then there's also all the custom needs, like custom, dosages, custom dosage forms, and clean products that are free of excipients as far as we can go, which means the inert ingredients or all the other, the additives that are in a lot of your tablets and other pills. So we can make all these drug compounds as clean as needed. And speaking of that part, so on a day-to-day basis, I'm in the lab. I'm kind of in charge of the quality assurance part of all the compounds that come out of our lab. So number one, I see all the raw chemicals that come in, and I see the certificates of analysis sheets. So I'm looking at those every single day to make sure those things are as clean as possible. And I was talking earlier, that come to find out in real life that not all drugs are like 100% pure. It's rare because a lot of times these just have like an entourage of other chemicals or heavy metals that may come along with them that are acceptable. They're within the range of safety for all that, but it's just a common accepted part of life. Like, too much of anything is a bad thing anyway.
Yeah. So we'll talk about that. Because that's it's one of the arguments that I hear online a lot. And I hear it from individual physicians, and I also hear it from some of these physician organizations like the Endocrine Society, where they kind of ward off people. Oh, don't use compounding pharmacies, don't use compounded medications, and they insinuate that they're somehow unsafe. And we're going to talk about that more and maybe bust that myth a little bit. I started learning about compounding pharmacies when I had a patient who was allergic to one of the dyes that was in their levothyroxine, or was it in Synthroid, in brand name Synthroid. I think it was one of the dye. There was something about the way that the big pharma version of levothyroxine was made that did not agree with that patient. And so when they came to me as a new patient, they had already been getting a compounded version of levothyroxine that they were doing really well on. So that's kind of when I first heard about it. So that is one of the advantages if you have an individual who has an issue
is sensitive
to one of the inert ingredients, or like you mentioned earlier, if the dose that they need is not available commercially, thyroid is a good example. If they are optimal at 118 micrograms of levothyroxine, well, they don't. Big Pharma doesn't make Synthroid at 118 mics, and they don't make a tablet that's divisible in that. But theoretically, I could call you up on the phone and say, "Hey, Cullen, could you make me a 118 microgram tablet of levothyroxine?"
Yes.
And you'd say, "No problem."
100%.
And that's incredibly convenient,
Yeah. Yeah, so that's that's like the basics of what we do is like essentially custom dosages. I mean, the dosage form thing comes in a lot too. People have trouble swallowing.
Yeah. So that's interesting too, because one of the things that you do as a compounding pharmacist is new delivery methods, right? That are not available from big pharma. So
absolutely.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
So an example, examples of novel delivery systems, I mean, we can basically any drug can be delivered to basically any system. Like we can put a drug in a nasal spray, we can put them in eye drops, ear drops, inhalational, parenteral. We can do drugs can be put in any possible way. They can be transdermal patches, all that. So. And that comes in handy for people who've got myriad issues about drug application. So
absolutely,
so that's a big one.
And those are delivery methods that big pharma is. They're not going to invest the millions and millions of dollars into making alternative versions of whatever medication we're talking about, just to cater to maybe a small subset of the population that needs that particular delivery system, because it just financially doesn't make any sense for them. So if it wasn't for compounding pharmacies, those people would just be out of luck, right?
Right, and the thing is, and that also comes into what's like the discussion about what is FDA approved and what isn't.
Yeah,
and oftentimes the meat and potatoes of that discussion is just because something isn't FDA approved doesn't mean it's bad or it's dangerous for heck's sake. That's the thing. People automatically assume that whenever a doctor or somebody says that it's not FDA approved, that it's dangerous. It's not true.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, I mean, every physician uses medications off-label. Absolutely. I mean, Neurontin or gabapentin is like a great example of that, right? I believe it's only. I could be wrong, but I think it's perhaps only FDA approval is for the treatment of seizures, epilepsy.
I believe so, actually.
But it may be approved for neuropathic pain, but it is used for everything.
Psychiatry, everything.
Everything, it's like you're not done until at least throw some gabapentin at whatever your problem is. What I mean? So
exactly.
Correct, and it is absolutely, like you said, it's a misnomer. It's just not accurate to say that just because something doesn't have an FDA, just because a company hasn't paid the thousands, maybe millions of dollars.
That's it.
To pursue the official 100%. FDA stamp. Does not mean that it's in any way unsafe.
Right, and this conversation also parlays into the next one about like the different salt forms.
Yes, we'll talk about that.
All the different salt forms. But
let's talk about the safety issue, because again, that's this just keeps coming up. And there's really strong pressure by the pharmaceutical industry on Congress to pass laws to restrict what compounding pharmacies can do. And in particular, they're really going after bioidentical hormones for some reason, which I don't really understand, because it's not like there's a ton of money in that.
Right.
You know, we can go down I don't want to go down like the conspiracy rabbit hole
Right.
on that, but
Right.
whatever the reason is, they, you know, they are insinuating that, you know, number one, well, let's talk about the first thing that they insinuate. One is that compounding pharmacies are not regulated. So
It's not true.
so let's bust that. Tell me how on a
Yeah.
every daily
Yeah.
basis you are regulated to ensure
Yeah.
that your products are safe.
Yeah. So number one, every state has their state board of pharmacy,
Right.
And they are ready to do their job. Trust me. At the slightest drop of a hat, customer calls with anything, they're going to call, and they're likely going to follow it up with an investigator to come through and look through everything.
Yeah.
Honestly, so that's the bottom line. They're kind of like the cops of of pharmacy. And you know what? Thank goodness for them. You know, they're doing their job,
Yeah.
and they have to do it.
Yeah.
Now, oftentimes we have to kind of help them and remind them how to do their job because we know the standards better than they do.
Yeah.
That's our practice at our pharmacy, just because we want to make sure we're 110% compliant for the patients.
Yeah, and it's
So,
absolutely, like you said earlier off camera, it is absolutely within, you know, it is within your best interest to be overly compliant, if if
Yes.
anything, right?
Yes. Yeah, 100%. And not only that, like I said, so we also have the on a national level, we have the federal regulations to adhere to. So FDA can send their agents in to come look in our pharmacy and come into our lab at any time, and so so like we we're just saying, it behooves us to be a little overly compliant,
Yeah.
if you will, because like I was telling you before, if they come in with the white glove, we want to make sure there's no dirt on it no matter what. So we have to make sure.
Absolutely.
Well, and it's not a game, we practice the way it's supposed to be done.
Exactly.
It's not like, ooh, FDA's coming, let's act like we're doing our thing.
Right.
Honestly,
right, and then we'll go back to the old way.
Yeah, we don't want to change everything back and forth. It's not
Right.
efficient. So we got one way. We
Right.
get it the clean and the right way.
Yeah.
That way, when FDA comes through. Now, listen, if the FDA wants to shut anybody down, though,
Yes.
if they really want to,
Of course.
they
find a
can
reason,
go
right?
for it. But you know what? Say what?
They'll
yeah,
find a
exactly.
reason.
They'll find. Yeah, they'll find a reason. But so that's again why we are going to know. Now, I am not the legal expert. We
Right.
have a guy on the team that does that. So I'm kind of the generalist. But our legal guy, man, all he does all day long is it's not all he does, but his main job description outside of normal scope of practice is to research the laws and our legal obligations and all that. So
Right.
we're
You stay
It's
compliant.
good. Yeah.
Well, talk to me about. Let's say we'll kind of start from beginning to end. When you get a bunch of raw drug material from the manufacturer,
Yeah.
what are the steps that you take as a compounding pharmacist to ensure the safety and purity of that product? As it goes as you manufacture it, or not manufacture it, but
Sure.
as you
Yeah.
compound it, I guess.
Sure.
So,
Okay. So we oftentimes we get the same kind of we get similar source chemicals. They all come when you break it down. Big pharma, little pharma, whatever. All these chemicals kind of come from the same source batches out there in India,
Yes.
Pakistan, China,
Yes.
common places.
yes.
But the difference between big pharma and our pharmacies is that we get those chemicals are tested at the facility in, say, India.
Right.
And so we got step number one right in good faith. So already it's passed. So
Yeah.
we know it's good because it's
Yeah.
coming from our supplier in India. Well, then it comes into it comes into the U.S. facilities, our international compounding suppliers, who then they'll take those products. Then they will do their own in-house testing.
Got it.
Okay.
Just to
They will
to
not
confirm.
even let that come to our pharmacy if it fails their testing.
Okay.
Now, if it somehow did get past them, then they have to get past me, because then I match up all the numbers to make sure all the values are within the safe range.
Perfect. Yeah.
So, and guess what? It has happened where they missed a number, and guess what? We made a phone call to them, and they said, thank you very much. We sent it back, and
Yeah.
they're like, well, that actually happens.
Yeah.
So my job is to essentially triple check.
Perfect.
It's probably more than that.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's been quite a few more checks than that, but it's my job to be the final check to make sure that this is pure. Not only that, I'm also in charge of testing these products for
Yes. Yeah.
potency, for purity, and for sterile. Well, not we don't do sterile, but for microbial activity.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I test all these for and all those tests come into play when we're trying to make claims about a product lasting, say it's going to be good for 6 months. We have to run these tests.
Yeah, you have to prove that, right? You have to
prove it. We have to prove it. That's the thing.
Nice.
So we make sure that what goes out to patients is all clean and good.
Perfect. Okay. Because again, that's the big argument. Like, oh well, they're importing raw drug from China. Well, everybody gets their raw drug from China, right? The United States doesn't. We don't manufacture anything anymore. It all comes from overseas. So,
it's all
you're
overseas,
telling me before you even put it in a product, there's 3 checks that get done.
At least,
And then once the product is created, then you go and you test it again in multiple different ways.
That we do not, but that 4th test, that's under the 4th test where I send it in. That is that's the finished product.
That's what I mean.
That's not just the whole final finished product. And we don't send each batch in for each patient like that. Okay,
of course.
We do. I send those in. I do random samples. Okay,
right.
That keeps our staff on point because they never know who's going to be next. I might walk by and anoint you. I'll literally tell the guy, hey, guess what? This one you made, this has got your name on it, so we're going to send this in. And so guess what? They all want to make really good compounds because they know, and that's what keeps them all, the randomness of my test to make sure that all of our products are awesome.
Perfect. Yeah, it keeps everybody on their toes, that sort of thing. Yeah. Well, what do you say to the claim, and I heard this recently, and I've heard it before, that, again, we'll just stick on levothyroxine. That 100 microgram levothyroxine pill made at a compounding pharmacy, again, the number that I keep seeing thrown around can be up to 20% off in terms of its. Yeah, so it could be 80
already
micrograms.
Wrong.
It could. So tell me why that's wrong.
Yeah. So anyone who said it could be the error threshold, is 20%. That's absolutely wrong, actually. So by law, we're allowed 10% swing, plus or minus, on the final product, either way. But you know what? But that's by law. But we have a higher standard because it's thyroid and it's dosed in micrograms, and a 10% swing either way could be a patient can feel that.
Well, absolutely.
And you probably had your sensitive patients who are real sensitive to small changes in their thyroid.
Yeah.
So what we do, we tighten it up. We have an in-house policy of all thyroid tests have to come out plus or minus no more than 5%.
Nice.
So we keep that super tight. And I believe, in industry, it's like plus or minus 2%. So we're pretty close to what machines do. This is all hand. Right. This is done by humans by hand.
Okay. Got it. Okay. So 5%.
And our record is amazing. We pass. But we also fail. Okay, but that's the thing. I'm here to say we are transparent. Okay, we're humans. And and that's the thing. This is, and also people have to understand there is an element of kind of experimentation. That's also the fun thing about compounding. Okay, yes, it's not as heavily regulated as retail commercial. But you know what? But at the same time, we are also not held. We have some creativity, much more room to play with. Novel solutions and remedies again that just are not.
And that's you and I have talked about that, where you've been tasked by your company to create some novel antimicrobial sinus washes, I believe, right? Which up until now did not exist.
Pretty much.
With the idea that these are going to target the biofilms that reside in people's sinuses. So you're right. You get to create some unique products for the ear, nose, and throat physicians in the community that have requested them, which is pretty cool.
And it's super gratifying to see it actually come to fruition. And now at this point, it's fun for me to see, my work or our pharmacy's work, being called in from pharmacies in Florida and California and New York. I'm like, hold on a minute, that's kind of fun.
Well, it shows that these ENT docs are talking to each other.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And they're communicating.
Yeah. So that part's neat.
Absolutely. So let's jump gears now that we've done that. Let's talk about these GLP-1 agonists and like specifically, Ozempic, Wegovy, the semaglutide, compounded versions of these medications. Now those they're still under patent, but because there's been a national shortage, compounding pharmacies, at least for the time being, presumably until Big Pharma ramps up production, you guys are allowed to make compounded versions of those medications. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
And
yeah,
these things
especially in time of
they're
shortage.
wildly popular, right? Like I don't know how much demand you're seeing on
Huge.
it, but like everybody is asking for these drugs because they work
Phone calls every day.
every single day. And the compounded versions tend to be a bit more popular, not only because the availability is better, but my God, the price difference between brand name
Huge, always.
semaglutide and let's say compounded generic is
Cents
massive.
on the dollar.
It's massive. Yeah. So I mean, I went on GoodRx a while ago just to see, and it was something like $800. Like if you didn't have insurance to cover it, which many people do not, or they have like very poor drug coverage on their plans.
Oh yeah.
The brand name pharma version is just outside of like a normal person's price range if they had to pay out of pocket for it.
Yeah.
And
It
not
is.
surprisingly, insurance companies don't want to pay for that drug, so they have very strict criteria. It is FDA approved for weight loss and obesity, but that doesn't mean that your insurance company is going to pay for it. You've got to have type 2 diabetes, and you have to have failed, multiple other, you have to fail metformin and failed all these other drugs before they'll potentially pay for it. So, the compounded version, somewhere is closer to like $300 in some cases, depending on which pharmacy you use. So, it makes these important drugs, highly effective drugs, much more available to the general public. But I'll put it up here on the screen. The FDA issued this warning, and this is from this little website, Healthline. FDA issues warning about off-brand versions of Ozempic and Wegovy. Okay, so what is the warning that the FDA said? And we're going to talk about this and why this is you and I talked about this before, and it's absurd. It's absolutely absurd. But I've heard endocrinologists. There's an endocrinologist, I'm not going to say his name, that has a podcast, and he's really good. I love listening to the guy. But he said, hey, I think his quote was like, hey, this is a big red flag. Any doctor that prescribes compounded GLP-1 agonists, like that's a huge red flag. But he never said why he thinks it's a big red flag. And as we're going to talk about, there is no reason. There's no reason.
Was that doctor? Does he lecture for Novo Nordisk? Or,
I don't know. He says probably. I don't know. There's a chance. I don't know. I don't know. So, but he's just parroting this FDA warning. Okay.
Sure.
So here's what they say, and I'm just kind of bullet pointing this off of the article. So these compounded drugs are made via mixing or altering medications to create a drug similar to semaglutide. Okay? And then the health risks of compounded semaglutide are not yet known, but off-label versions of the drug may contain contaminants. Okay. So we kind of talked about this. And then it says the FDA cannot verify the safety or effectiveness of compounded semaglutide drugs. And here we go, particularly those made with salt, okay, which have not undergone rigorous testing. So this is the crux of the matter, right? So the compounded version, you can talk about this way better than I can. Compounded semaglutide is semaglutide sodium, so it has a sodium cation
molecule,
attached to it, and apparently the brand name does not. So first of all, tell me why. What does the sodium do to it? It's a little sodium atom is attached to it.
Yeah, exactly. One sodium atom. So
one sodium
as you
atom.
can imagine, as far on a weight to weight basis, that one atom versus the weight of that entire molecule, it's not very much for one. So, and all of this, so in compounding, when a doctor orders a compound, first of all, if the doctor just says, I want if a doctor calls up and says, I want semaglutide sodium, okay, we say, great. Then he says, I want 1 milligram, or I want 3 milligrams of semaglutide sodium. We say, okay, doctor, you got it. So when we're in the lab, we're going to weigh out 3 milligrams of semaglutide sodium, because that's what the doctor ordered. Now, if the doctor orders semaglutide, the base, okay, so that I took issues with some of the verbiage of what you were just reading back to me, because it's all about semantics. So
of course, it's exactly
when they talk about, oh, this isn't semaglutide, oh, that's semaglutide. Well, honestly, semaglutide is always semaglutide, okay?
Right.
Base semaglutide is semaglutide, okay? There's one molecule, this, as far as I know, that's called semaglutide. So bottom line is, so if the doctor says, I want semaglutide, and all we have on hand is semaglutide sodium, then basically we have to apply what's called a salt factor. Okay, so we have to correct, because it's weight-based. So semaglutide sodium is going to weigh more than just semaglutide. So if we have semaglutide sodium, we're going to have to apply that salt factor to actually get the same amount of base contained in 3 milligrams of semaglutide sodium. So, for instance, speaking of how, so that means, like, since we're going to have to apply the salt factor and actually apply more, we're going to have to weigh more of the semaglutide sodium to get to that semaglutide sodium base that the doctor ordered. Well, gosh, that means there's a risk of actually even more sodium. That's what I'm telling you.
No.
We're going to have to
sodium.
apply. Yeah, we're going to have to apply our salt factor.
Right.
And, the funny thing is, when you do the math, and the way you find it out is you take the base molecular weight of semaglutide, you divide that by the weight of semaglutide sodium, okay, and then you get a ratio, okay, and then first you subtract, first you subtract the base from the salt, okay, so you subtract semaglutide from semaglutide sodium. There's your weight. That's how much salt's in there. It's like 23 grams out of 4,137 grams per mole. Okay. In semaglutide sodium. So it's nothing. So it's 23 grams over, you can already look at that number. It's going to be tiny, 23 over 4137. That's going to be
and if I recall,
so
semaglutide is dosed once a week.
Honestly, clinically,
it is.
It depends on what we're doing. Oral,
the
oral, right? The oral isn't oral. Is it just
no?
Once a week?
So it's injected once a week. So my point is,
okay.
I'm being a little facetious, but
but even if it's dosed daily, at 14, the max dose, 14 milligrams. Okay, let's say I'm just for the math of it.
Yeah.
So in each 14 milligram dose of semaglutide sodium, there is like 85 micrograms of sodium. There's nothing in there. Okay, and how much can we have in a day? 2,300 milligrams is what's recommended, max a day.
Yeah, you might as well, you could eat a Ritz cracker.
Yeah, yes, and you better.
Which has more sodium probably than your weekly dose of semaglutide.
Yeah.
So that when I heard that, I was like, this is just absurd. And it's very common to include sodium in injectable medications. I mean, I remember I took pharmacology years ago, but we use there's an antibiotic called nafcillin, related to penicillin, and there's a certain amount of sodium, hence the name NAF, NA, in it.
Actually, that I didn't know that. Thank you, doctor. That's
you're welcome. Yeah,
okay.
And it's that it is common to include sodium as part of, and I believe Zosyn, the antibiotic Zosyn, ampicillin sulbactam also has a salt on it. And my understanding, you correct me if I'm wrong, is that it basically is used to crystallize or stabilize the powder so you can remix it later, right?
Yeah, it's like different salts all have, salts in some cases, they're clinically insignificant. Other cases, they are significant.
Yeah.
Okay, but a lot of the times, salt selection is not so important as long as we can get the drug in the body. Okay, so
exactly.
That's the thing. Yeah. So it's a lot of times it's basically about solubility. But there is, so that's a whole nother discussion about the different salt forms where, there are instances like in the case of say, editate versus editate calcium.
Right.
Okay. So if if you're trying to treat a patient for, lead toxicity, and you call in, all right, I need some Editate suppositories for this patient. And you're going to keep that person on it for 7 days, 14 days, whatever you're doing. All of a sudden, that person is what? Hypocalcemic, right? All of a sudden, you've soaked up all their calcium, and you might, I don't think that's going to be so good for their heart and all their other conductive tissues.
I remember with Nafcillin and the antibiotics, and God, I haven't run into this situation in forever, but if you're dosing Nafcillin, I believe it's every 6 hours. And so, if you've got somebody with sepsis and they're going to be on IV Nafcillin for 10 days in the hospital, and you're also treating them for decompensated heart failure, maybe you need to make sure that you up their diuretics, to compensate for that.
Excellent.
But this tiny amount of sodium that's included in a once a week semaglutide is totally irrelevant. No. And it's just a scare tactic. It's really disingenuous. You and I both know where it's coming from. Clearly, this is not a genuine public health concern. No. Okay. In any way. No. What this is, I'm just going to say it because it's my channel and I give up. This is coming from pressure from the manufacturers. That they don't like compounding pharmacies. They're losing money. So it's a way to kind of discredit, this generic compounded version of semaglutide they don't come out and say it, because when I first saw this warning, I did a deep dive into literature too. And I couldn't find anything. I couldn't find any case reports of problems with semaglutide sodium. I found the same, I did the same math that you did, and I was like, I don't understand. Yet I keep hearing these endocrinologists and other physicians, and then these, the FDA parroting this warning, oh, be careful. So that's when I got a hold of you, and you basically said the same thing. So it's a bit it's disingenuous. It really kind of leaves a bad taste in my mouth. It like I said, follow the money, and not only that, and the things they try to do, like their scare tactics. I like you said, I couldn't find any actual clinical example of harm, but what I saw was some tertiary literature that said something like, must watch out in cases of hypertension. And I thought, look, man, there's just not enough sodium in there to do anything. And that's a whole other rabbit hole. There is such a thing as salt-sensitive hypertension, but not, there are many people. I'm going to tell you, I love salt. You see it, we've gone out to dinner. I salt everything. I just love it. And I'm good. I don't have an issue with blood pressure.
But even as a physician, you understand that there is so little actual sodium.
It's trivial.
On a daily basis there that I don't know unless, I can't imagine a physician trying to, I'm sure any conditions out there, but when you're managing someone's salt by the micrograms, your patient's pretty sick. Am I not?
That person's in the hospital. If I have to do that.
That person.
And I don't thankfully I don't do that anymore because I'm not a hospitalist anymore, but and the hospitalist and the cardiologist and the nephrologist do that. They've got to be because these people are critically ill. But listen, your average person just doesn't need to worry about semaglutide sodium. It's ridiculous.
No, and honestly, if someone's worrying about getting on their semaglutide sodium while the doctor's micromanaging their micrograms of sodium a day, I'm not even sure that Ozempic's going to be part of the picture anyway.
Right, they're not even going to be on that stuff.
No, they're that sick. Come on.
Forget it. Well, so awesome. I'm really glad you came on. I think we could go on and on about this, and I want to have you back on to talk a little bit more about compounded hormones, because that's a big part of what I talk about on the channel. But
love it.
We'll leave it at that today. And I would love, again, I say this all the time. If there's somebody out there watching this, physician, pharmacist, and you know something that we don't, if you can educate us about the dangers of semaglutide sodium, I'm open to hearing about it. But I looked, and then when I couldn't find anything, I turned to the best expert that I know, which is you, and you couldn't find anything on it.
No.
But again, hey, if somebody knows something, by all means.
We're here to learn. We're here to learn, right?
Yeah. All right, Cullen, thanks so much for coming on, buddy.
Thanks, Trey. Thanks so much,
bud. We'll talk to you later.
All right.
Bye-bye.
All right.
All Man Medicine video and audio has been created and shared online for informational purposes only. This podcast does not constitute the practice of medicine or professional healthcare services of any kind, including the giving of medical advice. I am not your doctor. No doctor-patient relationship has been established. This content is not meant to be a substitute for professional medical advice and should not be relied upon solely for that purpose either. The only purpose of this content is to present peer-reviewed, research-backed health information for your consideration. As always, rely on the advice and guidance of your personal physician before undertaking any activity presented here, and if in doubt or not comfortable with said activity, practice discretion. Your health is your responsibility and not ours. Finally, I take conflicts of interest seriously. I accept no compensation whatsoever from any private corporations, including pharmaceutical or supplement companies. You can trust that if I recommend a medication, product, or service, it's because I genuinely believe in it and not because I'm being paid to endorse it.